Greeting everyone. So today's live session would be very interesting. We will be discussing about post-election immigration impact on immigrant and non-immigrant employment-based visa category. With the 2024 election concluded and second President Trump administration is about to take the office, many are wondering that what would be the critical impact on visa categories. So today we will be discussing about self-petitioning, immigration, specifically national interest waiver and under EB2 category and EB1A. So joining us is attorney Silmi, managing attorney at Silmi Law, and he will help us to better understand these topics and provide actionable guidance on these topics. So attorney Silmi, while some visa categories may face challenges under second President Trump administration, it's important to note that self-petition immigrant visas like national interest waiver and EB1A are less likely to undergo significant changes. That being said, it doesn't mean they will remain unchanged. But I guess it's good to start with this question that why do you think national interest waiver and EB1A categories are less likely to face significant changes under President Trump administration?
So first of all, thank you, Seema. It's so nice to be with you, and I appreciate the conversation. I hope everybody out there is doing well. Look, I think that we always want to be informed by our data points, and we essentially have two major data points to go off of. And I think the most, important data point would be, the experience that we had from 2016 to 2020. And during that period, I did look back at our self-petition cases, at least those at Silmi Law. So when you look more broadly, certainly there are, impacts, I think on processing times greatly impacted. But in terms of actual approval of cases, we were really very, very high, particularly as it related to EB1A and national interest waiver during that entire period, and did not see any sort of, negative consequences from, the first Trump administration. So, and I think that overall, the guidance and the, adjudication was consistent with what we have seen in previous Republican administrations. You always have a shift to some degree when a Republican administration comes in, and that is from a statutory perspective, looked at as being, more likely to be like cases would be construed as under the plain language meaning of the statute. But as you know very well, we already sort of argue cases under the plain language meaning of the statute. That's why sometimes it drives me a little bit crazy when people talk about things like EB1A and fail to mention the actual statute and what the requirements are of EB1A. So if you meet the statutory requirements, there's no problem with your case, viability, regardless of who the president is. At the end of the day, as we all know, the United States is a country of law. It's not a country of men. Therefore, regardless of who there's going to be a lot of influence from the administration on policies. I don't want to sort of like understate that, but I do think that the levels of anxiety and the sort of discourse that is taking place online and forums and in the media is very exaggerated. The second data point I would point to is the most extreme versions of Trump's immigration policy, which is not actually going to be put in place because any changes of this degree must go through Congress. And at present, the Republicans have the majority in both the House and the Senate. However, the House is only a majority of 5. So there's, essentially 225 or 35, I can't remember, 200. Basically, there's a difference of 5. So if you lose, 3 Republicans, then you essentially lose that majority in any vote. And when you're talking about, basically, 1% of the, House caucus, then, that's going to be really, really hard to hold, particularly when you have so much corporate influence in decision making and rulemaking in the House. And I do think that there's probably going to be very little appetite for the kinds of changes that would impact high skilled workers over the next 4 years. And the other point is that the actual Trump, like if you look at, for example, their Project 2025, which is, he's sort of disavowed it during the, campaign, but it sort of reemerged. You don't see that much impact on employment based. In fact, it's sort of more generous. It talks about uh, kind of shifting from the current broken immigration system to a merit-based system that would be more favorable to individuals who are highly skilled, which I think, for a lot of our audience would be, music to their ears. Now, again, I don't necessarily think that those kinds of sweeping changes are going to take place. I mean, our audience knows that even things like country quotas has been nearly impossible to get through Congress. So I doubt that a very massive sort of restructuring of the employment-based system will actually happen. So what we're going to see, I believe, is going to be a direct impact on individuals who've entered the United States without proper paperwork. So, individuals who lack documents and have entered the United States without inspection, they are going to be the initial group that's going to be the most impacted. And the second, I think, group that's going to be impacted are individuals who are outside of the US. And that's mainly going to be processing times and delays. So if, for example, you have an approved visa and you want to make an appointment at a US consulate so that you can get that visa process, I do think that based, again, on our data points, which most, I think, the best data point is going to be 2016 and 2020 and what was actually put in place under the previous Trump administration. It was definitely understaffing at State Department and a slowdown in visa processing, which, by the way, if people remember, ended up speeding up the visa bulletin because you had less input into visa categories, and it then dramatically increased the speed of visa bulletins. So those of you who are like on a borderline EB2, for example, or if you're thinking about a national interest waiver and you're from outside of India, China, you might see a scenario where, things kind of end up going in your favor. So I don't think that, I do think it's a bit premature to kind of, lay out this sort of, gloomy scenario at this point.
Yeah, I think you brought up very interesting point because a lot of immigrants are concerned about processing times, as processing time may increase because the resources are going to redirected to other areas like border security and border enforcement. And while premium processing still might be option for a lot of employment-based categories like EB1A, EB1C, national interest waiver, still there might be, delay in adjustment of status process. I guess my question would be like, what strategies can petitioner adopt to avoid delay and potential RFE requests for evidence for self-petition applications?
Yeah, look, I think that I would argue that there's delays now. I mean, there's many people who have been experiencing unreasonable delays in the present moment. And, we definitely would encourage people to reach out to us if that's the case, because we can look into, for example, a writ of Mandamus, where, we can file under the Administrative Procedures Act and, establish that the government's not doing its job and, open up a negotiation with the department so that, folks can have the kind of support and, feedback. I mean, there's very simple things that are taking forever. I did a request for a genealogy report, which is like for somebody that was born more than 100 years ago. I want to pull their immigration records, and it's related to a property matter that's outside of the US. And it's like 3 times the normal processing at this point. And there's no human being I can reach that can give me any information. I've sent emails, nobody responds. So we have no choice but to file a lawsuit for such a simple issue. All we want is a record out of a scanned file that they have. And all somebody has to do is, they should just make it open that we could get it ourselves, but they don't. Somebody has to download it and email it to us. Nobody does it. So we have to literally file a lawsuit to make this happen and waste the, time of the Attorney General's office, waste the time of the court, waste the time of the judge, waste the time of the law, all because they cannot send a simple document. So there's so many things that are just inefficient. So who knows? We can see that, potentially, more efficient government. They're talking about that. So I would love to see that. I think that, a lot of the antiquated processes of paper filing should go away. If that happens, I think that would be a good thing. But, and then you have, I think, people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who's now going to be in the government, who I think understand immigration. They understand business. And, while they may have a big problem with, what they call open borders or what they call, chain immigration or what have you, I don't want to speak on those issues one way or another, in terms of validating their position, because obviously I disagree with that position. I think it's extremely valuable to have people from other countries come into the U.S. That's the U.S. history. That's what, the Statue of Liberty was all about, right? It was about bringing over people who were looking in search of a better way of life. So I think that they're wrong, but in terms of people who are high skilled, highly educated, employment based categories, I don't think that they're going to be I don't think we could necessarily predict the, negative impact that many out there are predicting without really fully understanding the past and understanding what the, modus operandi or what the way of dealing is among this incoming administration. So, I do see that there is going to be, a lot of potential things that people aren't necessarily calculating.
Yeah, I think you brought up very fascinating point about skilled worker. I was going to ask you about H-1B non-immigrant worker. H-1B workers often serves as a stepping stone for skilled workers seeking to come to U.S. on non-immigrant visa. And this is also, one of those categories that historically face significant changes during each administration. So I think the next question would be what changes can H-1B employers and applicants expect under second President Trump administration?
Yeah, Seema, this is the area where I do have some really concerns. I think H-1B individuals are a bit vulnerable because of the amount of publicity that the H-1B visa gets and a lot of the negativity, the perceived negativity around it. That is why I strongly suggest anyone who is on an H-1B take matters into their own hands. Don't sit on your hands and think that things are going to automatically change for the better. We did see a quadrupling of denials in H-1B category under the previous Trump administration. We also saw a massive increase in RFEs. including for so-called H-1B transfers, which we often take for granted. So I think that we need to approach the H-1B transfers, which is actually a new H-1B application. I think people need to understand it's not subject to lottery, but it has to meet all the same requirements of an H-1B. So I think that we need to look at the H-1B as a complex immigration filing and not as a paper pushing situation. So that is an area where I think we're at Silmi Law are going to focus on is starting to focus more heavily on the H-1B, because we do see that there's going to be a lot of complexity there. We only like to kind of go into the uniquely tailored complex cases, but that is going to be one where I do see a lot of complexity arising. And I would definitely encourage anybody who's on an H-1B who is is thinking about changing jobs and such, to consider self-petitioning in the highly skilled categories, because within that project 2025, they do have extensive discussion about STEM, about high skilled individuals attracting and retaining talent. However, there's a disconnect between the perception of attracting and retaining talent and STEM, and then how the H-1B works and who gets H-1B. So look, I mean, it's hard to really say. I feel like there's going to be more influence of technology companies in the second Trump administration than there was in the first. However, I do think it would be prudent for folks out there to, again, take matters into their own hands, because I do anticipate favorable adjudication in the EB1A STEM categories. And you need to take advantage of that, because just kind of seeing what happened with H-1Bs in the past, it does raise some alarming sorts of again, that's the data, right? The data point is what do we already know has occurred, and what we know is there was a quadrupling of denials. It doesn't mean the same thing is going to happen again, but based on the data points and based on what we see, even in the Project 2025 reports and a lot of the think tanks, that are out there, they do talk about, perceived fraud within the H-1B system. They talk about, and then the other thing I know that we have to be concerned about, by the way, is remote workers. Mm-hmm. If you're a remote worker, I do think there could be some level of crackdown on your, like work site location is different than the company address and things of that sort. So I think it's important to consult. Let us have a conversation. But if you want to get out of this mess, put all these immigration issues behind, then, let's have that conversation. Could I say something else? Because this doesn't have anything to do with immigration, but I would also say that there's going to be a lot of business opportunity in the next 4 years. The environment for business and investment is going to be really, I think, ripe. And anybody out there with like startup ideas who wants to like start their own company and they're just like waiting for their date to become current, please reach out. Honestly, you don't need to do that. We can figure this out. We have approval for EB1A for people that you wouldn't believe. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you are waiting and not pursuing this sort of, avenue that's available to you while, you're depending on the mercy of the government or the mercy of your employer and thinking that all these opportunities are going to be there forever. Next thing you know, you're over the hill and your dreams have, diminished. So I wouldn't wait for that. Let's just jump right in and see what we could do to help you out.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think the other concern that most H-1B applicants right now have is like President Biden administration provided, that compelling circumstance employment authorization for those who have H-1B visa and who are running out of that 60-day period, but they have a previously approved I-140, and they want to somehow stay in this country. Do you think with the current administration, the President Trump administration, will remove that policy or not? And what would be the implication?
Yeah. Look, I'm afraid so. I mean, I guess it will go toward whether I'm not sure. You probably know better than me. Whether does something like this have to go through the rulemaking process to unwind, because that might delay it from being, undone. However, there's like this track record of reversing things that the previous administration does. Like he used to do. Obama did this, therefore I'm going to do the opposite, even whether or not he supports it or not. Like I used to joke, if they would just call Obamacare Trump Care, then we'd all have universal health coverage for free. Just change the name and that'll be good. So if there's a way that this could be rebranded as something that's good for the economy and that Trump could take credit for it, it could happen. But I think what you bring up is a very a correct statement. I mean, I think things like compelling circumstance, EAD, will probably be constrained.
That's awesome. So do we have any question from
I didn't open it up fully for question, but what I was going to do, I actually was going to ask you a question, if that's okay, just in terms of a little bit more on two things. One is mandamus actions, and the other is you mentioned compelling circumstances, but I mean, a lot of people out there think, for example, like if you go into a mandamus action, you're putting your name on a lawsuit. It's going to be, like you're going against the government. Is the government going to retaliate? And those are the kind of concerns we often hear. So, what have you seen in your experience just in filing lots of mandamus actions and what kind of results unfold?
So I think the first thing I always tell client is like, mandamus, if you file for suit against government agency, they won't retaliate against you. That's the first thing. And I think that's the concern from, most immigrants, that we don't even have status. How we supposed to file mandamus or lawsuit against government? So there is no retaliation. Second of all, mandamus is not mechanism or tool for every single case. Like if your priority date is not current, you can't file for mandamus. You can only file for mandamus if you've already exhausted other remedies, including administrative and other legal remedies. That's one thing. And I think it's pretty useful mechanism and tool if you've faced unreasonable delay. Because based on INA, Immigration and Nationality Act, the immigration officer should make decision on your case in a timely manner. So I had a lot of experience filing for mandamus for someone who has a pending adjustment of status or asylum case pending, and they're not getting interview invitation from government. And I think it's a pretty useful tool. And I'm sorry, what was your second question about?
No, that's great. I mean, I think that what you mentioned is spot on. I mean, especially the issue of retaliation, right? Because I think when it comes to mandamus action, which again, for folks who are just tuning in or just getting an understanding, it's a legal action that allows us to sue the United States government or the department, agency, official who is responsible for so it would be like, for example, today it's Alejandro Mayorkas, the director of Homeland Security, Secretary of Homeland Security, because of some unreasonable delay in processing. For example, processing time is for a particular kind of case is taking more than 2 years. And one thing that I think people don't really understand is that it's not that the published processing time is like, divine knowledge that could be, that nobody could dispute. Like when they say, oh yeah, we need 3 years to, process a green card, right? That's not reasonable by any standard. So if your data is current and they're saying that they need 3 years, why do you need 3 years to process a damn application? Why does it take 3 years? You're not doing your job. That's what the Administrative Procedures Act is all about. It's about saying that the government has an obligation to do what it is, assigned to do, right? So if I, gave, if somebody gave me an assignment and I said, oh, okay, I'll be, check back with me in 3 years, I mean, they would kick me out of the building, right? So that's what this is all about. So anybody who's out there who is frustrated with, their processing time, they're just sitting there forever, and the, person on the other end of the line is just saying, oh, you're within a normal processing time, it's only been 36 months. That is baloney.
Exactly.
That's not, there's nothing normal about that. We need to file and we need to sue.
Exactly. And that timeline, like USCIS processing time, it's subject to change. Like 1 month it's 60 to 36 months. The other months it might be 40 months. So it's constantly, subject to change. So you don't really have any
arbitrary change.
Exactly. You don't have any certain, date, like when your green card application be processed.
Yeah. No, that's very, very true. So I do think that Mandamus is going to be a tool that we're going to use a lot more in the next 4 years. So, those of you who, have that scenario, I think that you should be well aware of it. And I do want to mention there is some discussion within the Project 2025 related documents about L1A of all things. I thought that was interesting. And it did talk about reduced wait times for, certain employment-based visa categories. And it uses L1A as an example in the non-immigrant employment-based visas. So, I think that there are, again, aspects of, what we anticipate to come might be a little bit better. And I know we both have to go, but let me just tell you a quick story. About, this is probably 2015 or so. It was kind of like, the election season. And a journalist reached out to me for an interview about my experience as an immigration attorney under the Trump administration. And what they were basically, based on the questions, I could tell that, they were kind of trying to get me to say things that were like anti-Trump and anti-government. And while we were experiencing, a tough time from the government, I mean, I'll be honest with you, we're experiencing a tough time from the government today for many cases and many issues, and many things go unanswered. I just told you the story of a very simple genealogy request that we can't get an answer to. So what I had informed this journalist is, look, I don't think this is anything new, that the kinds of delays or the kinds of tactics being used within the employment-based arena, I don't think are really a game changer. I think it's something that we have to adapt and be sort of agile in, and ultimately, fight and attack on behalf of our clients. And our results indicate that, we're not on the public policy side, we're on the advocacy for our client side. And our clients are being served, and our clients are being successful, regardless of who the administration is. And I can tell you that interview is not published because we did not give them the answer that they wanted to hear. What they wanted to hear is, oh, everything is horrible, everybody's failing, everybody's getting deported, the whole, thing is crumbling. And if that were the truth, I would tell you, honestly, and I would say it out loud. I would scream it from the rooftop. But it wasn't the case. Not in the employment-based arena. I did accurately tell you what the situation was with H-1B. And I'm telling you that we're going to need mandamus actions. But NIW, EB1A, what they did was they shifted to a plain language meaning of the statute approach. And those of us who understood that and prepared and provided analysis according to the plain language meaning of the statute, our cases were approved. And I think that ultimately that's the result. That's what happened. Some processing times took a little bit longer for non-premium cases. There's going to be weird policy decisions that are sort of, coming out there just because they want to reverse something that the previous administration did. We're going to weather the storm. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be, things that are put on hold. So I would just say, don't have unreasonable anxiety about the situation. Take action. Take matters into your own hands. The only way that you can improve your circumstances is to do something about it. And that's what we want to do. We're ready to fight. I'm so prepared and so excited for the battle that we're going to enter here. We're definitely going to, make sure that we're winning and supporting our clients and doing everything we can to continue, to prepare uniquely tailored cases to meet folks' immigration dreams. And thank you, Seema. Thank you, everybody out there. Anything else?
For joining. Thank you so much for joining. It's always pleasure talking to you. And, so if anybody has any immigration question, don't forget to reach out to our law firm, Silmi Law Firm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, guys. Take care.